Sometimes when I'm trying to understand a person's motives, I play a little game.
He said that sentence to the person who was already using it against him. Littlefinger spent 30 years building a system that let him read every room, predict every betrayal, and survive every war without holding a sword. Inside Winterfell's Great Hall, on the night he died, he demonstrated that system out loud, in front of the woman who had already mastered it. He thought he was explaining how to see through other people. He was confessing how he had moved through the world, and Sansa Stark had been listening for longer than he ever calculated. To calculate the atmospheric pressure of this great hall, we must understand what each person standing inside it had already paid. Sansa had been a hostage inside the Red Keep for years, passed between captors, used as a symbol, sold as a body. She watched Ned Stark die because he believed that truth and honor would protect him. She watched Joffrey perform cruelty with an audience. She absorbed Cersei's lessons about the gap between what a woman says in public and what she plans in private. She survived Ramsay Bolton, a man who turned suffering into theater, because Petyr Baelish arranged the deal that put her in his hands. She married a sadist with the quiet assistance of the man who claimed to love her more than anything alive. Arya stood to the left of the throne, still as stone, carrying the names and faces of people she intended to remove from the world. Bran sat in his chair saying almost nothing, holding something that was not memory but something closer to record. A full accounting of events as they actually occurred, not as anyone chose to remember them. Petyr Baelish had spent his entire life ensuring that no such record could exist. He had arranged the poisoning of Jon Arryn. He had used Lysa Tully as an instrument and discarded her through a hole in the floor. He had written the letter that made the Starks believe the Lannisters murdered their patriarch and lit the war between two of the realm's most powerful houses. He had placed his blade against Ned Stark's throat and smiled, and he stood in this hall still certain that the people facing him were the same children he had categorized years ago in King's Landing. He had not revised his read of a single one of them.
Are you sure you want to do this?
It's not what I want. It's what honor demands.
Sansa opens the entire proceeding by removing herself from it. She does not say she chose this. She assigns the decision to honor, an abstract obligation that cannot be questioned, cannot be argued against, cannot be framed as ambition. That move is surgical, and it did not come from nowhere. Littlefinger taught her across years of quiet instruction that a person who displays desire openly gives every enemy a handle to grab. Never show what you want. Find a larger principle and stand behind it. She is running his lesson in his direction on the first sentence of the trial, and he has not noticed it yet because he is still scanning the room for exits rather than listening to the architecture of what she is building around him. The framing of honor demands does the specific work of foreclosing sympathy. No one in this hall can argue against honor without arguing against everything the Stark name has survived to represent. She has locked the perimeter before the charges begin.
You stand accused of murder. You stand accused of treason. How do you answer these charges, Lord Baelish?
The title comes last. Lord Baelish arrives after the charges, not before them, which means the room hears the accusations before it hears the name of the man they belong to. That ordering is not accidental. A name said first carries dignity. It introduces a person to a room. A name said after a list of crimes strips that dignity away and redefines who the person is before they can speak a word in defense. Petyr built his entire identity on being the title, on being the function, on being so useful that no one could afford to remove him. Sansa collapses that identity in the space of one sentence by making the title the last thing the room hears. His face moves through 5 expressions in under 3 seconds. Every one of them is a version of recalculation. The look of a man who has just discovered the room does not match the map he drew of it.
You murdered our aunt, Lysa Arryn. You pushed her through the moon door and watched her fall. Do you deny it?
Sansa opens with the charge she personally witnessed. Every prosecutor who has ever constructed a case knows to lead with what cannot be denied, to establish that the accused is capable of the act before moving to the acts no one witnessed. Littlefinger does not collapse. He does not go silent. He says, "I did it to protect you," which is not a denial. It is a reframe. He admits the action and tries to replace its meaning. Pushing a woman through a hole in the floor becomes, in his version, a protective act performed on behalf of the person now prosecuting him. The instinct is immediate, practiced, and almost involuntary. It is the move of a man for whom reality has always been something that gets shaped after the fact, rather than something he encounters directly.
She was a troubled woman. She imagined enemies everywhere.
Accused of murder, he puts the corpse on trial. He calls Lysa unstable, paranoid, a woman whose perceptions could not be trusted. If the room accepts that Lysa saw threats that were never real, then everything she ever said about Petyr becomes noise from a broken mind, rather than testimony from a witness. He makes her mental state the first line of his defense, so that her death loses its voice before anyone can quote it. DARVO. Deny the act, attack the character of whoever is bearing witness, then reverse the frame so the aggressor appears to be the one who was wronged. The automatic sequence a manipulator runs the instant accountability enters the room. This is not a technique Petyr decided to use in this moment. It is a reflex so deep he no longer chooses it. Every person who ever threatened his position ended up reframed, made to seem unstable, dishonest, dangerous, or deluded. Ned Stark was framed as a traitor. Lysa is framed as a madwoman. The pattern is always the same. Destroy the credibility of the witness before the witness can speak. What he does not account for, standing in this hall, is that one of the witnesses in this room cannot be discredited because he was never present to be questioned.
You held a knife to his throat. You said, I did warn you not to trust me.
Bran hands back a sentence from a private room in King's Landing, spoken years before any of the people in this hall were old enough to hold power. Petyr pressed a blade against Ned Stark's neck and said those words with the casual satisfaction of a man who had waited a long time to say them. There were no surviving witnesses to that sentence. No record, no letter, no one in the room who could carry it forward. The architecture of Littlefinger's entire empire was built on exactly that fact, that he operated in spaces where no permanent record existed, where the only version of events was the one he chose to share, and where anyone who remembered differently could be reframed as unreliable, or removed entirely. Formation monopoly. The specific form of power that comes not from wealth or armies, but from being the only person in the room who holds the complete picture. Power that requires total control of what others know, and collapses the instant someone enters with evidence that was never supposed to survive. Bran does not argue. He does not interpret. He does not ask Petyr to confirm or deny. He simply holds the sentence the way a recording holds sound, without judgment, without politics, without the possibility of being bought, pressured, or discredited. For the first time in his life, Petyr Baelish is in a room where his most fundamental tool, the controlled release of information, has been made obsolete. He cannot manage what Bran knows because Bran does not know it the way a person knows something. He holds it the way a stone holds a carved word.
Thank you, Sansa. I have known you since you were a girl. I've protected you.
Protected me by selling me to the Boltons.
The voice drops register. The statesman posture goes. He reaches across the space between them and tries to activate something he is certain still lives there. The bond, the gratitude, the residue of the girl who once needed his arm to lean on. He says, I protected you, with the sincerity of a man who genuinely believes it. And that is what makes the moment strange. He did not experience the arrangement with Ramsay Bolton as a betrayal. He experienced it as a political transaction that he chose to frame to himself as a form of care. The gap between what he believes about his own motives and what his actions produced in the life of the person standing above him is so wide it constitutes its own kind of blindness. Self-serving attribution bias, the cognitive pattern where a person consistently interprets their own damaging actions as protective, generous, or necessary. Not as a deliberate lie, but as a genuine distortion that makes the damage invisible from the inside. He cannot see what he did to her because he has always categorized himself as the person watching out for her. The category is load-bearing for his sense of self. Removing it would require him to rebuild an internal architecture he has been constructing since he was a boy in love with a girl who chose someone else. So he does not remove it. He holds it in front of him like a shield in a room that is already decided.
That's what you do, isn't it? That's what you've always done. Turn family against family, turn sister against sister.
Sansa performs a behavioral autopsy while the subject is still breathing. She does not accuse him of individual acts in isolation. She traces the pattern, family against family, sister against sister, mother against aunt, naming the underlying logic that connects every specific betrayal into a single operating system. Every phrase she uses carries his fingerprints because she learned to speak this way from him. He taught her to look beneath the surface act and find the structural motive underneath it. He taught her that people do not act randomly. They act from need, from wound, from design. She is applying that exact lesson to him right now, in front of a room full of witnesses, and he is hearing her use his own analytical language to construct his execution. Projection, the compulsion to assume other people carry the same hidden drives you carry, because you cannot fully model a mind that operates from different foundations than your own. The reason a manipulator always suspects manipulation, always reads hidden motives where none exist, and always underestimates the person who actually has none. Littlefinger spent his whole life reading the worst possible motive into every room he walked into, because the worst possible motive was always the one he brought with him. When he tried to turn Sansa against Arya, he ran his default assumption, that Arya must want what he would want in her position, which is power over a rival. He could not process the possibility that two sisters might actually choose each other over him. That failure of imagination is not a tactical error. It is the deepest structural flaw in his entire system of reading the world, and it is the specific crack through which everything fell.
I am Lord Protector of the Vale, and I command you to escort me safely back to the Eyrie.
I think not.
Panic wears a rank when it has nothing else. He names a title, a castle, an army, a seat of power, all of them several days' ride from the hall he is standing in. The Knights of the Vale are present in this room, and they do not move. Lord Jan Royce, who watched Petyr operate in the Vale for years, who sat through his performances of loyalty and competence, looks at him the way a man looks at something he has finally identified correctly. The title floats in the air and lands nowhere. I think not. 2 words. No volume, no anger, no satisfaction visible on her face. The discipline of those 2 words is itself a demonstration. The woman who was trained to control her expression in front of powerful men is controlling it now in front of the most dangerous man she ever knew. And he cannot read what is underneath because the skill she is using to hide it is the one he gave her. His own curriculum has become the last wall between him and the truth of how completely she has moved past him.
Thank you for all your many lessons, Lord Baelish. I will never forget them.
Not contempt, a genuine accounting. She names out loud exactly what happened, that every instrument she used to take him apart he constructed and handed to her himself. The patience, the motive reading, the ability to wait, the discipline of never showing what you want until the moment you take it. The understanding that the most dangerous weapon in any room is always the one the other person does not see coming. He built a student who absorbed his complete curriculum and then turned it with precision toward the one target he never thought to protect himself from. Himself. Then Arya steps forward, and the blade that opens his throat is the Valyrian steel dagger, the same weapon whose false attribution started the first domino Petyr ever pushed. He told Catelyn Tully the blade belonged to Tyrion Lannister. That lie became the match that lit the war between the Starks and the Lannisters. It traveled through the hands of assassins, through years of betrayal, through the long arc of every consequence he set in motion, and it came back. The first lie of the story and the last breath of its cleverest architect meeting on the same edge of steel, in the hall of the family he spent a lifetime trying to dismantle. But here is what the show never told you. In George R.R. Martin's published novels, Petyr Baelish has not yet fallen. He is still operating, still in the Vale, still holding the young Lord Robin Arryn like a hand tool, still building alliances and managing impressions and positioning himself for the next move north. His downfall has not been written. The execution in Winterfell, the trial, the sentence delivered by Sansa using his own language, none of it exists on the page. The television adaptation made a creative choice that the books have not yet made. It decided that the person most responsible for starting the war that destroyed the Stark family would be destroyed by the only surviving member of that family who had absorbed his complete methodology. The books may take Littlefinger somewhere else entirely. They may give him a different ending, a different kind of unraveling, or a death that has nothing to do with the student he thought he was shaping. What the show gave us is something the source material has so far withheld: the satisfaction of a closed loop, of a man being undone by the precise mechanism he built to protect himself from exactly that outcome. When you build a system of manipulation precise enough to teach, you are also building the instrument that reads you most clearly. Littlefinger did not lose to a stranger who came at him from outside his defenses. He lost to the methodology itself, to the set of tools he handed over across years of careful instruction, to the student who sat closest to him and therefore absorbed the most, including every part he never intended to pass on. The modern equivalent does not require thrones or poisons. It appears every time a leader builds a team member too well, trains them in exactly the kind of strategic thinking that eventually gets applied to the leader's own blind spots. The closer someone sits to your methods, the less distance they have to cross when the time comes to use those methods without your permission. Petyr Baelish created the conditions for his own execution by being too effective a teacher. The only version of Sansa who could have taken him apart was the version he spent years building. So here is the question this scene leaves open. When Sansa says thank you for all your many lessons, is she speaking as someone who finally owns herself, or as someone who became exactly what he made her and simply aimed it differently? 2 people can watch that line and reach opposite answers. Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I'll see you in the next.